We'll finish up our bee season with a look at how the honey gets from the hive to the jar.
So this is the first of this year's honey being bottled.
And we'll get a lesson on the amazing life of bees. 9 million acres of forest, 1,700 miles of continuous shoreline, 4,300 lakes, 12,000 miles of streams, more than 300 waterfalls, 15 counties, 2 time zones, and 1 area code. Welcome to the Upper Peninsula. Welcome to 906 Outdoors. As the bee season approaches its end, it's time for the beekeeper to collect his share of the honey, leaving behind the bees' share, enough to feed them through the winter.
For me as a beekeeper, the season is over. We're going to be pulling the honey off today. For people who have just one hive and only a little honey, they use what they call a bee escape. This is just a little bee escape. What it does is it allows bees to go down into this plastic tube, and they come out here, and there's 2 wires in there. And they spread apart as the bee goes through, but then they close themselves up so the bee can't get back in. So you put this on an inner cover, which has a hole designed for this. You set it down, the bees go down, and they empty the super being my honey, or the beekeeper's honey, and they go down and they can't come back. And you come back in a couple of days and you can take them off and almost be bee free. There might be a couple in there. When you have a lot of hives, you can't do that. If you have a lot of supers like we do here, it's kind of impractical. You could, but I like to move along a little quicker, so we use fume boards. And this is a fume board right here. It has like a solar panel on this side, and that's supposed to heat up this side, which has this, it's an almond smelling substance that the bees don't like. I'll put a couple of X's in here in a little square, set it on top of the hive, and leave it for 4 or 5 minutes, and that'll drive the bees down. So we're gonna run a little X across here, make it stink good. Then we'll go over here, figure out how I'm gonna do this. Now sometimes this will drive the bees all the way down to the bottom box. And that's what you want. There's a couple of bees in there. And then you put this on diagonally. I'm not quite sure why, but you leave the corners open. And I'm guessing that helps penetrate the hive with this smell they're not real happy with. So now we'll go and do the next one. There you go. They're making some noise. There you go.
Today's show is brought to you in part by Rapid River Knife Works, home of Michigan's largest custom knife factory showroom.
Looks like they're down 1 box almost completely. Ideal is to be able to just take the box off and put it in the car. But real often they'll get hung up in there, you can't get them out. So you have to use a bee brush and take it frame by frame and put them into a fresh box. So I'll take this off and I'll take that box off, and I set it over on my platform here. And then I use a bee brush to brush them off. There's a lot of bees in there yet. Not as much honey as I expected. Been a strange year. There's only a couple of good frames in this one. There's not a lot of honey in there. This is still uncapped. You can see it in the cells. It's not capped yet. When we get other ones down the ways, and maybe even the next one, on this one, it should be capped. You can see, this is what a cap looks like right here. They cap it off. That means it's down to 16% in humidity. They get the water down from the 90s to down to 16%. And then the super goes into the back of the car, and you seal it all up, because bees are great robbers. And if you leave it open here, they're going to be all over it. So the idea is to get as few honeybees in the honey house when we're extracting as possible. My wife doesn't like bees buzzing around her when she's working there, so we try and get most of them out. They're never have been aggressive. Here is a different story. You're taking their honey off, especially when we get down towards the bottom when we get next to the brood box. Sometimes they get a little feisty, and sometimes they can start out feisty. We're going to find out today where they're going to start. I have a long sleeve shirt. You see there's more capped way up in here. So there's going to be a lot more honey in this one. I have a really nice bee jacket. It's a double thick with a veil and all, but the cameraman stole it. And there's a frame with all capped honey in it. Not a bad looking frame. You'd like them to bulge it out more, sticking out probably this far, but for some reason they capped it short. Back when I started, that's what even commercial beekeepers wore. They wore khaki shirt, long sleeves, and khaki pants. Now, of course, modern technology, we got all these nice bee suits and that, but you could do it without it, and I have in the past. I've only used the jacket a few times. This is 100% beeswax foundation. Most of the stuff I have has a plastic center and then it's coated with beeswax. This is 100% beeswax and it has wires in it. The downside is that sometimes when they get bored, it gets quiet, they'll eat holes in these. The reason they're out here now is that that smell is still in there and it's hot, and there were a couple of boxes they were in before. So you got all those bees that were in 4 boxes are now in the 2. They'll be out here until they cool down and until they settle down. This one was a little weaker, so it didn't matter. Those 2 bigger ones in the middle there, they're probably going to be outside for a while, especially the one that has 3 on. So they'll work their way in now. Even these over here, they'll hang around until it gets cool and then in they go to the right hive. It's called bearding in the summer. When it gets real hot, sometimes they'll beard like this all by themselves. That's called bearding. They'll do that before a swarm sometimes. Now they're doing it because it stinks in there. They're going to stand on this outside and they're going to fan. Now they fan the honey the same way to dry it out. Now they're going to be fanning to get that smell of my honey robber out. It's all part of beekeeping. They build bridges between the boxes, and they're bridges of comb, and it makes it hard to lift the box up. So you got to kind of twist it a little. There's a lot more bees per square inch in there now than there was before. We squeezed them down to 2. Everybody gets 2. You can see them in there drinking that honey because they know something's going on. They're going to grab as much as they can. So the next time you see us, we'll be taking the honey out of these frames, cutting off the cappings, that's the wax on the outer edges, and then we put it in an extractor. It whips the honey out.
Here's Bernie the beekeeper with the story of the amazing life of bees.
In the honeybees, you have the queen bee, which is she kind of is the heart of the hive. She hatches just like all the other bees, except she's in a special cell that's different than the other bees. It's a much larger, and she's fed royal jelly all until they seal her off after 9 days. Now, worker bees, they get royal jelly for 3 days, and then they get bee bread, which is a little coarser food, and then they get capped after 9 days also. But they're in a smaller cell, and they become a worker. So the queen is the heart of it. She lays 2,000 eggs a day, or up to 2,000. Sometimes some people say more. She dictates what kind of a temperament you're going to have, how hard of workers they are. Everything comes through her genes. After a number of years, she starts to fail, or if she gets injured, or if she's just kind of a poor queen. her numbers start to drop. And the bees in the hive recognize this. They go and take one of her eggs, or several, and they put them in what they call a superseding cell. It starts out with a little cup in the middle of a frame, and then it'll hang like a little finger. And they keep feeding that egg, or eggs, depending on how many they do, royal jelly. They'll seal it off, that's capped off. 19 days after the egg is hatched, it'll hatch out of that cell. It lays around for a day, and then it goes out, it mates. Sometimes they'll lay eggs right with mom in that same hive for a while. And then once they get going, mom disappears and everything, they go up to the 2,000 or better, and everything is fine. When you introduce a queen, I will put the queen in. You put the queen in a cage. Now, the bees in there don't know her. She doesn't smell like them. They're not happy with her, even though they know they're queenless, and they're not happy about that. The way I do it is I give her a couple of days in there, and then I go back in and peel off a little strip that's on the bottom of the box. The box will be about this big, and on the bottom is a candy strip that goes in there. And you peel that off, and I run a little nail through it, like a little fishing nail, to get it started. And you put that all back in, and they'll eat out that candy in 2 days, maybe 3. And now she's been in there at least 3 or 4 days, and they will accept her, hopefully. Sometimes they don't even then. But so it's kind of it's a tricky thing introducing new queens. So the longer she can stay in that box, the better. But you don't want her in there too long. So, but that's what'll happen. They'll once they accept her, she'll just wander around for a day or so and start laying eggs, and everything will be peachy door. So she lays all the worker eggs. The workers then hatch, and after they've hatched, they become a house bee or a nurse bee, and they start feeding the larva that's in the right off the bat, right the same day they hatch. They hatch, they eat a little honey, and they go to work. Then, as they get older, they start to secrete wax out of their abdomen, and within a month, they've gone through that where they've been a house bee. They help clean. They get to the point where they become a field bee. Now, the field bee is the one that goes out and collects the nectar and the pollen. A scout bee finds a source, comes back, and tells the hive, hey, down the road, so many yards or a mile, they go up to 2 miles, is this source of nectar or honey, or both. And they do that through the bee dance. It's a circle with a shake in it and a bisect. And that all they make a circle, and they cut diagonally through that circle. That tells those bees around them what direction and how far, in relations to the sun and the hive, the source of nectar or pollen is. Now, some bees will bring in pollen only, some will bring in nectar only, some will bring in both nectar and pollen. So off they go, and they get that source of nectar and pollen, and they bring it back to the hive. The pollen's used for baby bees and for raising the brood. The nectar goes back to a house bee, who puts it into a sac. The enzymes, and this isn't their stomach, you hear this, it goes in their stomach. It's not their stomach. It goes into a special sac. The enzymes attack it and turn it into honey, and then it's placed in a cell. Then the cell is filled up. The worker bees inside the hive, the house bees yet, are fanning inside to dry it out from 80 or 90% water down to 16%. And they know this. When it gets to the right percent, they cap it off with a nice thin film of white wax. That's called cappings. The drone, which is the male bee, his job is to breed with any queen when she's out flying. So that what the drone does is he spends his life doing nothing but going out to the corner looking for girls. Now, somehow they're created so that when a drone and a queen, even from this hive or any other hive, know exactly where to go to meet for mating. Now, you could have 100 drones up there. She'll mate with anywhere from 15 to 25 drones that'll mate with her. Most of our drones, 98 or 97%, will never mate. They're just there in case. Drones come back every day, and on nasty days, they stay home. Nice sunny day, they go out and look for a queen. At the end of the season, when we get close to our first frost, the drones get booted out. They drag the drones out. 2 bees will grab a hold of them and pull them out, and the guard bees will stand at the entrance and not allow them to come in. And guard bees, again, are just before they become field bees. So that's the baby bee. When they work their way through, they become guard bees. They watch the entrance. They don't allow other bees from other hives to come in. They don't allow bumblebees to come in. And they don't allow drones to come back. Once they're booted out, they're out. And so that's it for the drones. It takes 12 honeybees, the life of 12 honeybees, to produce 1 teaspoon of honey. So that's why you need so many of them. You get 60,000 or 70,000 bees in a hive when the honey flows are going, because it takes a lot of bees to get that much honey, for me to get honey and to get 100 pounds of honey for them. Now, when they're doing this, they go out on a flight. They're going to visit 50 to 100 flowers per flight. That's about 1 million flowers in a lifetime. So without pollinators like honeybees, a lot of flowers wouldn't get pollinated. A lot of food and vegetables wouldn't get pollinated. Our basswood trees would not get pollinated like they do with honeybees. There's just not enough other pollinators out there. So it's, that's one of the importance. 80% of the flowers in the world need to be pollinated by a pollinator. And that isn't all just honeybees. It can be a butterfly, it can be a bumblebee, it can be a mason bee. There's a whole host of insects out there that are just dying to pollinate because it's part of their nature. It's the way they were created. Go out there and get that pollen and nectar, and by doing so, they replenish themselves and they allow the flower or the fruit tree or the vegetable, whatever, to produce a fruit and continue to grow.
906 Outdoors is brought to you by Race Driven, your source for premier power sports products. The last we checked in on Bernie, he removed the honey-saturated frames from the hives. It's now time to remove the honey from the frames.
What I'm going to do is just take the caps off here, and that's the wax that the bees put on to keep the honey inside the cell. And so when I do this, I can now get the honey to extract out. And there's a variety of ways of doing this. Whoops, this is a hot knife, electric hot knife. This is a roller, so if I miss one or 2 cells or even a bunch, I can roll like this, and it opens it up. You gotta get at the honey. This is what the color that you look for, is a nice white. So we're going to open these up as much as we can. Another way is using a scratcher. The scratcher leaves more chips of wax, then they get caught in the filter, so we have trouble filtering. And so I catch it from my wife. So we tried this roller this year and it works out real well. There you go. Wow, this one's got brood in it too. And this is drone brood because it's bulging way out. And of course the drone is the male. Somehow the queen got up in here and laid some eggs. And there's a reason I vary these. If I used a hot knife on here, I wouldn't be able to get it all right. So one more. And you can see this is all nice and shiny. It's ready to be capped. They just didn't have time to cap it. The little cappings that's on here, I'll just break those up with the roller, and the same on this side. These are pretty full. Otherwise, it's called green honey. It's not down to 16% water, and you only want 10% green honey in there. Now, if it's green, you can take it and shake it, and it'll squirt out. That tells you it's green honey. This stuff looks like it's right close to capping, so it should be okay because they're already capping this. But I watch for that. You never want more than 10% in your honey batch, or it could ferment on you. The wax down here is now filtering. There's holes in this tub. This is a 2-piece tub. The holes allow the honey to work its way down, and it'll fill this bottom container, which has a gate valve on. We run it through a filter, then bottle it. It'll sit in the house for a couple of days to get it all drained down. Then we take the wax out of here. I heat it up and melt it. Out of that, I'll probably get maybe another quart of honey. Then the wax is taken and put into a double boiler again, it gets filtered, then it goes into a crock pot where it sits for 48 hours liquid. And that allows the molecules to all settle to the bottom. Any debris that I missed in my filtering is going to be on the bottom. Turn it off, let it harden up. The next day you flip it over, scrape off the bottom. It's called beekeeper wax. Beekeeper wax is not ready for candles, but it can be used for a whole variety of other things, like salves, waterproofing things. So it can be used for a whole host of things. And then we can start making candles. Good to go? Okay, this is our new electric extractor. It's the first year we're using it. It's an 8-frame. It's called a radio extractor. You put the frame in and they spin like this, and the honey comes out of both sides at once. What we're doing here now is we're extracting the honey. So you put it in like this, and then it actually pulled out centrifugally, runs down. We just light filter, we don't heat. Our honey is always considered raw honey because it's unprocessed. We filter out the wax particles, we filter out the wings and the legs and any other debris that's in the honey, and then it goes in the house for bottling. This container is a 5-gallon bottling bucket. It has a gate valve on the bottom so you can bottle right from the container. Now when we bottle this, you like it to set so the air bubbles all come to the surface. Set overnight, and the air bubbles will come right up to the top. But today, just so that you can see how the bottling works, we'll bottle some, and there might be a few air bubbles in it. This is such a white honey this year. It's just beautiful. Really happy with it. Hopefully we get bunches. So this is the first of this year's honey being bottled. We're going into pint jars now. We have 2-pounders and pint jars this year. And then eventually we're all going to all mason jars. We have some nice 7-pound. Now they look a little hazy, and that's because of all the air in them. Once they set for the night, you come out here tomorrow morning, these things will be crystal clear. The finest honey in the world.